On the tinsel front is a dramatized reading of letters written by an American soldier, Corporal Oliver Whelan, to his sister Elizabeth during World War II. These letters were discovered 4 decades after the war in the attic of a London home. This is Season 1, Episode 1, Washed Out. It was in 1942 that Oliver, known to family and friends as Ollie, dropped out of Dartmouth College to enlist in the United States Army Air Forces as a pilot cadet. After completing pre-flight at Maxwell Field in Alabama, he went to Lafayette, Louisiana for primary flight school. It is here that his letters to Elizabeth, whom he affectionately refers to as Bet, begin.
December 2nd, 1942. Dear Bet, oh, sister, I'm writing to you because, well, things have taken a bad turn. I so wish you could be here so I could tell you in person. You, of all people, would put it into perspective, make me laugh, make everything seem better. Alas, that's not going to happen. I'm ashamed to say that I've washed out of flight school, and not just out of the pilot's program such that I'll continue training as a navigator or bombardier. I'm out of it altogether. It's not like I failed a test, crashed a plane, or punched out one of my instructors. There's a part of me that would be okay with something like that, especially laying flat an instructor. There's one who's a real jerk. No, it's because, well, turns out flying doesn't agree with me.
Just pull back on the stick. Doesn't take much. Real gentle like. Whelan, you listening to me?
I don't feel so well.
Yeah, that happens first time up. You'll get over it.
I think I'm gonna be sick.
Not in my plane, you don't. Hold it in.
I don't think I can.
Jesus Christ! Not all over the cockpit. Do it in your shirt.
The instructors thought the nausea was due to this being my first time up, only that wasn't the case. Every time I went up afterwards, it was... Because I was a star student on the ground, they didn't want to give up on me. I got sent to 3 different doctors who poked around my ears, washed them out, and poured through medical books, hoping to find some explanation. And they kept sending me up in the trainer, figuring my body would adjust eventually, but nope.
This is amazing! It's always at 12,000 feet. You're a goddamn human altimeter.
The only thing gained from these excursions into the wild blue yonder were buckets of yellow vomit and a conviction that I'd rather be dead than in an airplane. Remember our dog Patty and how he hated to go in the car? While every other dog loved to climb in, stick his head out the window, and have his face buffeted by the wind, Patty would shake uncontrollably, burrow down in the well behind the front seats, and soon be regurgitating the same yellow bile I've become so familiar with in the skies above Louisiana. Father, you remember, was disgusted with Patty's behavior and convinced he'd just get over it. So he kept putting him in the car. I can now sympathize with that poor old dog. Compounding the shame of failure is not knowing what's next. The Army Air Force doesn't appear to know what to do with me. So I'm hanging around until they figure something out. What I don't want is to be stuck in some job that keeps me stateside and out of the fight. I'd rather go into the regular army if that would get me into combat. It's really hard waiting around here, given there's not a damn place on this base where you don't see or hear planes taking off or landing. I'm also no longer one of the gang, of cadets, that is. They all feel bad for me, but it's as if I've contracted some contagious disease, and they keep their distance. So I'm not just out of the job, I'm lonely. can't tell you how embarrassed I feel. I know that the dizziness isn't my fault, but I still feel like I've let everyone down. You, the family, our country, and myself. I haven't told Father or Mother yet. I wish you could do that for me, especially since Father will have that look and be full of I told you so's. Mother, of course, will be relieved. She hated the idea of me flying from day one. Of course, I can't expect you to be my messenger. I will, however, tell them as soon as I know where I'm going. Dear Bet, still waiting for orders. The CO has taken pity on me and put me to work in his office pushing papers. It is boring as hell, but something to do. I'm still, however, unable to get away from the drone of airplanes taking off and landing. Each a stab in the heart reminder that I will never get up there. I had an interesting encounter with an old-timer sergeant named Hancock. He's been an airplane mechanic since they invented the things, and in the Army since World War I. They say he was with the 94th Aero Squadron in France and worked on Eddie Rickenbacker's plane. He's a gruff, silent son of a bitch everyone is afraid of, even officers. He's got this terrible smoker's cough and sounds like he should be in the grave. He normally doesn't give anyone the time of day, but for some reason, he took pity on me the other afternoon when I brought some requisition orders down to the hangar. As classmates and trainers were taking off, one after another, I couldn't help but stop and watch. The longing in my eyes must have been pretty apparent, because old Hancock came shoveling over and offered me a smoke. Knowing I had washed out, he asked me why I was still around. I explained, adding that I hoped to get into combat in some way.
You pups, so damn young and eager. Y'all think you have some control over your life. Well, get that out of your head. The Army, son. It's like God in the Old Testament. He may free you from Egypt and send you manna from heaven, but he'll just as soon destroy all your crops, kill your firstborn, cover you with boils, or put you in the belly of a whale. Don't think you'll ever figure out why. Could be a test of your faith. Could be a reward for it. But most likely, it's just a goddamn whim. You understand?
Actually, I didn't. And I certainly wasn't inclined to hear such a gloomy prognosis of my future. But I nodded nonetheless.
There'll be plenty of times where you'll be cursing and shaking a fist at this God. Just know that, in a way you'll never understand until you're a walking corpse like me, it'll make you a better soldier.
And with that, he threw his butt down, stamped it out, and walked back to work without another word. I almost called out a thank you to him, but decided he wouldn't want to hear it. Dear Bet, I finally got my orders. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're orders. No more sitting around waiting while every takeoff and landing taunts me. As part of some special assignment, I'm being sent to something called the FMPU at the 18th Air Force Base Unit. It's in California, in a town called Culver City, which is near Los Angeles. Nobody here has heard of the 18th Air Force Base, or the FMPU. Perhaps it has something to do with aircraft manufacturing. So many of the big plants are out there. Or maybe it's mechanic training, perhaps for posting in the Pacific. Whatever it is, I'm excited to finally be moving on. I'm catching the train to LA tonight. Well, actually, tomorrow morning. It leaves around 3 a.m. Dear Bet, it's 2 in the afternoon and the train is somewhere in Texas. My seatmate is a young Marine from the small town of Isola, Mississippi. His name is
Benjamin Grubb Samuel Boatwright, but you can call me Ben. My pappy named me after Benjamin Grubb Humphreys.
a Mississippi-born Confederate general who fought at Gettysburg and was later governor of the state. Ben's County having been named for Humphreys, there were many a Benjamin Grubb running around, hence Samuel, his father's name, to distinguish him. After I boarded and joined him in Lafayette, Ben, counting states he'd been in, was determined to stay awake as we crossed the Texas border, and so we talked until after the sun came up. He's dead asleep now, mouth open and drooling. A beanpole with impressive muscles who wears his heart on his sleeve. He claims to be 18, but he looks younger. I suspect he lied to enlist. While the Gulf of Mexico can't be more than a half-day's drive from his home, he never saw the ocean until he went to boot camp in South Carolina. Hearing this, I asked why he chose the Marines. Before answering, he reached into his duffel and pulled out a Life magazine clipping. It was a photo of a South Seas island.
See this picture? My mama taped it up in the kitchen when I was 5. Now, I've been crazy about this beach ever since, and dreamed of finding it one day, or one just like it, laying on that hot sand with a coconut in hand. I wanted to pick a service that might get me to that beach. I thought about the Navy, but you know, I'm the best gosh darn shot in Humphreys County. Won the county fair in 40. Didn't think I'd have much of a chance to use a rifle on a ship, so I signed up for the Marines.
Ben was already missing his dogs. Hunting dogs, that is. The Boatwright family having...
The best pack of chases not just in Humphreys County, but golly, I swear, the entire state.
They were apparently legendary canines, having an ancestry dating back to before the Civil War. To prove this, Ben recited the dog family tree. Good Baptists that they are, the Boatwrights named their dogs after Old Testament figures. Ben's recitation consequently sounded as if he was reading from Numbers or Deuteronomy.
So Azaz had Shema, this beautiful bitch that had 10 litters, one including Obed.
The amazing thing was that he had it memorized. More likely better than he had his own family tree.
I hope those dogs will be okay when I'm gone. My daddy put me in charge of them when I was 12. And while there are chores I hate, I don't shirk on this one, no sir. Now that's not true of my brother Joshua. He's supposed to watch them while I'm gone. He's lazy. Cares more for playing football and girls than the farm or the dogs. I'm afraid he'll do something dumb, like not make sure the pen is closed at night. I tell you, if some critter comes by and the gate's not latched, Lord almighty, those dogs will be in the next county by dawn. And Sheba, oh, my favorite girl. She's got this boil on her leg right now. It's got to be drained and cleaned every day, you know. And if it isn't, it's hard, you know, leaving home.
Yes, it is. I, too, was suddenly seized by desire to cry. As I said nothing about Ben's tears, he said nothing about mine. Instead, we sat in silence and looked out the window, the clickety-clack of the train's wheels registering each foot we were being taken from families, friends, and dogs. We were too embarrassed to acknowledge our homesickness, but took comfort in sharing it. And for an unlikely moment of vulnerability, we were able to be ourselves, before putting back on and hiding behind the armor we had to wear as soldiers. Looking at Ben sacked out now, dreaming of his dogs, I smile at what improbable traveling companions we are. He, a Bible-thumping Johnny Reb farm boy from the heart of the Confederacy. Me, a privileged Catholic Yankee from New England. Yet I feel like I've known him forever, and that we'll be friends for just as long. Dear Bet, I'm writing this to you somewhere in California as I recover from a rather crazy 12 hours. It didn't take long for Ben to find 3 other Marines who were also heading to San Diego, and it was no surprise when at the stop in El Paso, they all got off the train in a quest for what is the holy grail of any soldier, alcohol. They found it in a case of beer and a couple bottles of bourbon, which they snuck back on. And with a patriotic call to support the armed services, a call made more compelling with a small bribe, a conductor agreed to let them use an empty Pullman for a party that night. As Army, I would normally be the last person to be invited. Indeed, the others resisted, but Ben insisted, and for one night, I was deemed honorary Marine and welcomed to the illicit rolling speakeasy located in 609C. I don't use the speakeasy analogy lightly.
What's the password?
Semper Fi.
So, Boatwright, you sure about this, Dogface?
I would put my life in his hands.
Okay then, Army boy, come on in. But we're keeping an eye on you.
Marines, in case you didn't know, consider their service to be superior to all other branches. They believe they are the toughest of the tough, and that extends to their drinking prowess. At Dartmouth, I thought I was a pretty good drinker, able to hold liquor as well as any classmate. But here, I was strictly in the minors, these Marines being Major League All-Stars. Ben could keep down an astounding amount. He attributed this to drinking his uncle's 120-proof moonshine since he was 12. Not to excess, he insisted, but enough to build up a strong tolerance. As an Army man, I was viewed with suspicion and subjected to an interrogation as to where I had trained and where I was headed. I didn't want to reveal my ignominious failure at flight school, but I got drunk enough to do so. The Marines found my situation to be hilarious.
You actually barfed all over the instructor. An officer?
I sure did. All over him. All over his back. All over the cockpit. There's barf everywhere.
You're all right by my book.
Mine too. I like you, kid.
As tends to be the case with drinking, our little covert party got a little out of hand. Opening the window, 2 of the Marines speculated on the feasibility of climbing through it onto the roof of the train. Convinced by the rest of us that this was a suicidal act of stupidity, they instead started howling like wolves at the almost full moon. And the rest of us joined in a loud and joyous chorus. It wasn't long before the conductor burst in.
What the hell?
He was furious.
I said you could do this if you were quiet. I've got complaints from all over the car. Now, leave your bottles and get back to your own seats before I summon the MPs who are a few cars up.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, sir.
Apologies, sir.
Will do.
Will do.
Sorry, sir.
The next morning, raging headache, queasy stomach, dry mouth, all the symptoms of a terrible hangover. I was awakened by Ben bearing coffee in a paper cup from the dining car. I looked out the window and saw that we were pulling into Yuma, where Ben and the Marines were getting off to catch a connecting train to San Diego. The coffee was weak and tepid, but a godsend. Ben, of course, seemed no worse for wear. The benefit of being suckled on moonshine. I bid goodbye to him on the platform. We had been together for less than 2 days, but had grown remarkably close. You take care of yourself in the Pacific, Ben. I hope you find your beach.
After the war, Ollie, you're gonna come down to Mississippi. Stay on the farm. I'll take you hunting. You'll see my dogs are as good as I claimed.
I look forward to it. We shook hands. He grabbed his kit bag and took off after the other Marines, headed for their next train.
Hey, guys, wait up for me!
Feeling a bit lonely, I got back on my train, which soon pulled out. As we crossed the bridge over the Colorado River, a porter came through the car, singing,
California, here I come, right back where I started from, where bowers are flowers bloom in the spring.
Al Jolson has nothing on him.
Birdies sing and everything. A sun-kissed miss said don't be late. That's why I can hardly wait. So open up that golden gate. California, here I come.
The delay of the daylight in San Francisco will now be departing at 2 p.m. on track 6.
Dear Bet, a few hours ago we pulled into Union Station in Los Angeles. It's a big, beautiful building. Tall ceilings, impressive wood beams, beautiful Spanish tiles. And coming in from all parts of the country, there were soldiers and sailors everywhere. You could really feel the energy behind the war effort and the hustle and bustle. There was a USO booth where they were giving away free coffee and cookies. At it, some girls were passing out flyers for something called the Hollywood Canteen, a club for soldiers, supposedly staffed by Hollywood stars. The girls were all attractive, but I couldn't take my eyes off one of them, a tall, leggy brunette who was drop-dead gorgeous. Now, I wasn't the only guy who thought so. 2 soldiers were vying to be the one to flirt with her.
You should come by the canteen. You can dance with Betty Davis, Vivian Lee, Veronica Lake, any movie star you want.
I'd rather dance with you.
Well, if I'm on my junior hostess shift, it's a date.
Hey, don't waste your time on this guy. Me, I'd go AWOL for a date with you.
Oh, don't listen to him. I wouldn't just go AWOL. I'd slap a general and tell him where to shove it.
Well, we don't want either of you doing any such things. We don't want you in the stockade. We want you out there winning the war.
Well, at least tell us your name. Mine is Bob, and this yuck here is Phil.
Well, hello, Bob and Phil. I'm L.
What's L stand for? Laura? Louise?
Not the letter L, dopey. It's L, spelled E-L-L-E. 2 L's. It's French for she.
Ooh la la.
So her name was Elle. I won't forget that. I was beginning to like the idea of being stationed here in Los Angeles. Ben would love this Hollywood canteen. He confessed to me that he had a crush on Rita Hayworth and a fantasy that he'd marry her and bring her back to Mississippi to care for his dogs. I don't have to report until tomorrow, but I'm just too curious about my posting to wait. So, I'm heading to Culver City right now. Dear Bet, oh my God, my posting is nothing like I expected or could have predicted. As instructed, I got off the trolley at the National Stop and walked up a block. There was a stretch of large buildings strangely fronted by a mansion, or what looked like a mansion. Big letters over the front porch read, U.S. Army Air Forces. But I gotta tell you, it was not like any base I'd ever seen. There was no guard hut, there were no guards, there were no soldiers. I was standing there trying to figure out what to do when the front door opened and a soldier came out. The word soldier, however, was a stretch. This middle-aged guy was overweight and wore his uniform as if it was a pair of pajamas. My immediate thought was that if this was what we were sending against Hitler and Tojo, we've already lost. I stopped him as he passed. Excuse me? I'm looking for the 18th Air Force Base. Is this it?
I think so, but I'm not sure.
How can you not be sure?
I can never keep those military numbers straight.
But you are a soldier, aren't you?
Yeah, but not one that fights. I'm a prop man.
A prop man? Like in airplane props?
God, no. Like in stage props. You know, books, lamps, guns, frying pans, whatever a scene requires.
Why would you be doing that?
Because that's what we do here? We make training films. Stuff like that. I just know it as the first motion picture unit.
It began to dawn on me. First motion picture unit. As in FMPU?
Yeah!
But why would I be assigned here? I don't make movies.
Beats me, kid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've only got a 15-minute break and I'm dying for some cigs. So if you don't mind...
No, that's okay, thanks. Except, where do I report?
I guess to the personnel officer? Through the door and to the right.
As he walked off, I stared up at the building. First motion picture unit? There had to be some mistake. But through the doors of the mansion I went, and down a corridor until I came to a large room full of desks where 3 soldiers were pounding away at typewriters. Behind a big desk in the center of the room was a lieutenant talking on the telephone. He looked really familiar, but I couldn't figure out why until I looked down and saw the nameplate in front of him. It read, Lieutenant Reagan. That's when it dawned on me. This was that actor, Ronald Reagan. You remember him, don't you? He was in that movie Canute Rockne, All-American, the one we saw with Uncle Stan and Aunt Betty around Thanksgiving 1940. He played George Gipp, you know, the Gipper. I think you had a crush on him. Actually, the more I think about it, you definitely did. You said he was cute. Well, here he was. A lieutenant in the Army Air Force, and some big cheese at this base. This assignment was getting stranger by the minute. As I waited for Lieutenant Reagan to get off the phone, I considered how he looked in person compared to how I remember him on the screen. He looked older, but was still a handsome guy. And he was pretty convincing as an officer as he threw his rank around over the phone.
No, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. We need 2 moviolas and we need them by Monday. And no buts. They will be here. This is not RKO you're talking to here. It's the United States Army.
For a second, I wondered if perhaps none of this was actually real. That Reagan wasn't really an officer, but was only playing one, and that I had wandered onto some movie set and they had just kept the camera rolling. I actually turned around and looked. But no, there was no camera, or lights, or anything like that. It was real. Ignoring me, Reagan just kept on yakking on the phone. Knowing you would have loved one, I debated whether to ask him for an autograph, then decided that was a really stupid idea. The guy was an officer. Finally, he hung up and, after placing a paper in an inbox with a deliberate flair, turned his attention to me. I saluted and handed over my orders. Private Oliver Whelan reporting for duty, sir. He saluted back, took the papers, and gave them a long and careful read.
So what is it you do, Private?
Do, sir?
Yes, do. Are you a cameraman, editor, set builder, actor, what?
I'm none of those things, sir.
Well, what do you mean, none of those things?
I don't do anything like that, sir. I mean it. I've never done any kind of movie work.
Then why the hell were you posted here?
I'm wondering that myself, sir. He gave me the evil eye. I washed out of flight school, sir. Next thing I knew, I had orders to report here.
And nobody told you why?
No, sir. Hell, sir, nobody in Louisiana had even heard of this unit.
The Army.
He stamped my orders and handed them back to me.
Until I can determine if there was some purpose for you being sent here, we'll find something for you to do, if it's only sweeping up the sawdust in the scene shop. And who knows, maybe there's an actor in you. This could be your big break. Beats hanging out at Schwab's.
I had no idea what that meant, but was afraid to ask.
You're a day early. Do you know that?
Yes, sir. Arrived on the train and thought I might as well come over. I was curious.
Well, it doesn't matter. Report here tomorrow at 0800.
He gave me the sharpest salute I had seen in my short time in the service. He took it far more seriously than any officer in flight school. I returned it, trying to match its precision, but then didn't leave, which clearly annoyed him.
You're dismissed, Private.
Yes, sir, I know. I'm just wondering where I bunk, sir, and where I might get something to eat.
The thing to understand, son, is that this is no ordinary Army base. It was a movie studio, is a movie studio, and will always be a movie studio. We don't have barracks. Most of the men who work here are residents of L.A. and go home every night. That said, on a temporary basis, we bivouac soldiers like you up at a military academy about a half-mile away. It's pretty crowded up there right now, but there should be a spot in a tent on the parade ground. And you can grab some grub at the school cafeteria. Miller!
A private around my age popped up from behind one of the typewriters.
Yes, Lieutenant.
See if you can find someone to give Whelan here a ride up to Pacific. If you can't, just give him directions and point him the right way. He can walk it.
Yes, sir.
I followed Millard towards the door and was almost out when...
Whelan, if you don't mind me asking, how did you wash out?
I didn't mess up, sir. Just a physical condition. Something about the air pressure over 10,000 feet makes me dizzy. So dizzy I'd barf all over the cockpit. He nodded, but with a look of sympathy, not contempt. Then pointed to his eyes.
I've got bad blinders. Hopelessly nearsighted. The closest I'll ever get to combat is this desk or a soundstage. But I don't dwell on it. I'm helping win the war the way I can.
Yes, sir. But I can still fight, as long as I stay on the ground.
I understand. But try to make the most of this while you're here. There are things you can do besides fire a gun.
Yes, sir. Now, Bet, I'm in a tent at that military academy, riding to you by flashlight as it rains hard and the canvas leaks. So much for the famous California sun. It's cold, wet, and miserable. I don't know what kind of work I'm going to get tomorrow, but I do know this. I do not belong here. First thing I'm going to do is put in a request for a transfer to an infantry combat unit. I am not going to spend the war making movies in Hollywood.
On the Tinsel Front is written, produced, and directed by Christopher Bomba. The role of Oliver Whelan is voiced by Brian Stanton. Joining him in this episode is Zane Accord as the flight instructor, Hancock, and the conductor, Gabriel Oliva as Ben and Ronald Reagan, John Katona as Marine Number 1 and the prop man soldier, Jonah Whelan as Marine Number 2, Mike Price as the porter, Samara Frame as L, Caleb A. Fields as Flirting Soldier Number 1, Chris Bomba as Flirting Soldier Number 2, and James Coyle as Miller. I'm Mary Bomba. While On the Tinsel Front purports to tell a true story, all the characters are fictional, except for the real-life personalities, some more recognizable than others, who actually served in the wartime positions they do here. For more information about these people, Hollywood during World War II, and the actors, visit the podcast website at onthetinselfront.com.